At the start of the 13th century, the Song dynasty ruled over China. Because of their location in the middle of the mountains, deserts, and tundra, the Song lived in isolation, which allowed them to grow their society and develop culture without the disturbance of other countries. The Song dynasty came into being in 960, and they ended up ruling for over 3 centuries. They became the wealthiest and most innovative empire in the world throughout the period 1200 to 1450. Song used Neo-Confucian teachings that supported the government to shape social classes and the family system. China was also strengthened by its imperial bureaucracy, an organization that had appointed officials carry out the empire's policies. The bureaucracy had been around since the Qin dynasty in 221 BCE and was a continuity throughout multiple centuries and dynasties, but under the Song, the bureaucracy expanded and strengthened. The Song dynasty expanded educational opportunities for young men of lower economic class, which allowed them to score well on the civil service exam and get a desired job in the bureaucracy. The civil service exams were based on knowledge of Confucian texts. China's bureaucratic system became known as a meritocracy because the officials had to demonstrate their merit on the exams to obtain their position. Around the same time when the Song dynasty ruled over ancient China, an empire would begin to rise from the sands of the Middle East. The Delhi Sultanate, an ancient Islamic empire, now would take control over a large part of southern Asia. This empire, consisting of mostly Hindu and Islamic leagues, and the lower class consisting of mostly textile workers and merchants, was essentially a trade empire working along the Silk Road, utilizing caravanserai, stopping structures for merchants to bathe, eat, and trade horses. They more easily made the trips across the desert. They will also go on to develop many new technologies and sciences such as irrigation canals, algebra, and architectural formulas. This would later begin to collapse during the reign of the Sayyid dynasty when Turkic conqueror Timur who sacked Delhi itself. Under the Sayyid dynasty, the Sultanate was reduced to a country power continually contending on an equal footing with other Muslim and Hindu principalities. This would finally lead the Battle of Panipat, where the last sultan of the Sultanate would be killed, and the Mughal Empire would instate its rule. This would later lead to the conflict with the new world power, the Mongols. During the first golden age of the Silk Roads, productivity was increasing at an incredible rate. The Silk Road was a massive land-based trade route, stretching from China to Europe and North Africa. Silk was the most luxurious item traded on the Silk Road, giving it the name it has now. Silk was considered a symbol of high status, putting it into high productivity. There were many other items traded here as well, such as textiles and gold, which were all transported by camel caravans. Even though silk was significant enough to have the entire trade route named after it, it was still not even the most significant part of the Silk Road. Religion and culture would have to be the most significant part of it due to the number of societies influenced by the many different religions and cultures, such as Buddhism. These religions and cultures had both inward changes and outward changes. The Silk Road wasn't all good, though, as there were also some downsides, with one of the biggest being the spread of diseases. One of the most significant diseases being spread this way was the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death, which killed around half of the European population in only 2 years. Nations that had a massive influence on many others, such as Rome, began to decrease in that influence, causing the first golden age of the Silk Roads to come to an end. However, the Mongol Empire was starting to grow and expand years later, allowing for the revival of the Silk Roads and the start of its second golden age.
The Mongols are one of the most well-known and brutal people in history. Starting out in the harsh and arid Gobi Desert, their landscape shaped their culture. The Mongols expected everyone to become skilled hunters and horse riders, as they were made to be hunter-gatherers due to their surroundings. The celebrity of the Mongol people, Genghis Khan, rose to power using personal relations between the Mongolian tribes and unified them, becoming ruler of all. He formed friendships with rulers of different Mongolian tribes and married his oldest son to the daughter of a neighboring Khan, another referred king, to name a few examples. Once he unified the tribes, he began his legendary conquest in 1210. The Mongols headed eastward to the Jin Empire, then the Karakutai Empire in Central Asia, and then the Islamic Empire in the west. Genghis's typical tactic was to send envoys to ask the enemies to surrender. If the enemy refused, then everyone without useful skills, something the Mongols particularly valued as the Gobi Desert made craft workers vital, was killed. Well, what were they going to do? Fight back against the Mongols? Tales of Genghis's brutality and conquest quickly spread, as it is said that the Mongols did horrendous things during war, such as hurling their disease over the walls of who they were planning to conquer as if they were bombs, killing civilian populations after wiping out their military, and making 3 mountains of skulls from those they beheaded at Nishapur. One for the men, one for the women, and one for the children. It's pretty crazy. What's even crazier is that after all the gore, Genghis Khan was a very peaceful diplomatic emperor. The 13th and 14th centuries are even often called the Pax Mongolica, aka the Mongolian Peace. He issued religious tolerance to those he conquered, sent soldiers to protect the Silk Roads, and established new trade channels throughout Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe, and reinvigorated the trade routes that hadn't been used in years. Somewhere later down the line, 3 of Genghis's grandsons created their own khanates, kingdoms or empires, and expanded into Asia and Europe. We'll start with Batu and the Golden Horde. Batu led an army of 100,000 soldiers into Russia and conquered small Russian kingdoms and forced them to pay tribute. Eventually, the Golden Horde made it into Kiev in 1240, which was looted and destroyed. Afterwards, Batu went further into Western Europe, defeating many in military encounters. However, fate had other plans. Batu got word of the death of Ogedai Khan, the Great Khan's successor. Batu called back his troops and went back to Karakorum to attend the funeral. After that, it is said Batu simply lost interest in conquering the rest of Western Europe. Russia eventually took back their land from the Mongols through an anti-Mongol coalition. Now let's move on to Hulagu and the Islamic heartlands. Hulagu took over the southwest region, invading the Abbasid territories in 1258. They destroyed Baghdad and killed the Caliph, along with 200,000 residents. Soon enough, they were defeated as they sided with the Muslim Mamluks and Christian Crusaders. The two saw the Mongols as a threat. And finally, Kublai Khan and the Yuan dynasty. Kublai had put his efforts into conquering China, which at the time was ruled by the Song dynasty. The Chinese army was more powerful and harder to defeat than many other Mongol combatants, as it took Kublai and his army 36 years to overtake China. He established the Yuan dynasty once he won, and also practiced religious tolerance like his grandfather. He would eventually lose power due to the formation of the White Lotus Society, an organization planning to end the Yuan dynasty. The people of China were unhappy, as Mongolian leaders eventually discriminated against them, choosing foreigners over native Chinese people in the government, for example.